party tonight! TV party tonight!
Oh, we got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews.
Don't want to talk about anything else!
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated to our favorite shows!
Oh, my circuits!
Everybody loves Hypnotoad.
Scary dog!
Pearson at Blurnsville.
Futurama!
Good evening, and I want you to understand how tonight's going to go, my fellow podcast fans. When Robert Winfree sort of took my hand and walked me into a cavern and said, you know, you keep talking that you want other people to pitch you ideas and that you're willing to do in your horror for content and all these other things, he did that with an entire pile of anime standing behind him that I didn't see because it was a dark cavern. It was a dark cavern that he led me into where he hides all his anime. And I'm Mark Radulich, as you may well know, and this is TV Party Tonight, and he is Robert Winfree. How do you do, Robert Winfree? You sly dog, you.
First of all, I object to the term pile.
Neat stacks?
I have pitched you 2 shows, okay? 2.
No, but the implication is that you have piles of shit behind you that you are just waiting to unearth on me, and you're a very effective fighter. So you lead with some Devilman Crybaby, and you pepper with some Eizouken, and then comes the knockout blow, which is God only knows what.
Oh God, I almost want to. You can't set me up like that because now I'm tempted to take you up on your challenge.
Okay.
But
I know you have something in the chamber after this because we did Devilman Crybaby, and you were like, this is gonna wreck your soul, and we had a long conversation about that, and it was a very good show. I went back and listened to it. And then you're like, okay, lighter fare, something a little bit more palatable. A not a creme brulee, but a creme de menthe, if you will. In this long dinner that you're serving me, a palate cleanser, a sorbet. Keep your hands off Eizouken. Did I do that right? Eizouken.
Sure.
Do you feel slightly bad for the Japanese every time I do that?
The number of various other cultures I occasionally feel bad for when you have to try and pronounce words in their language is long.
Well, I only mess up like names. We typically don't delve into a tremendous amount of other cultural stuff. Look, that's neither here nor there. The point is that
minor point to the contrary. I remember our discussion of Black Panther when we had to review that.
Very good point. It's a fictional country. It doesn't count.
Okay, fair enough. If that's the line we want to draw. Okay.
Anyway, keep your hands off Eizouken. That's what we're discussing tonight. That's what you said was more up my alley. And in large part, you are correct.
I didn't necessarily say more up your alley. It's a lot less... In some ways, it's very experimental. A lot of what Yuasa does is. But it's a lot less avant-garde.
It definitely pontificates, but it pontificates on a medium that I pontificate on and that I like to talk about. So it was tolerable, maybe a little long in the tooth, and we'll get into the nuts and bolts of it. Maybe 10 episodes instead of 12, but it was like, hey, I know a guy who's really into film. Here's a show that celebrates film. We should probably talk about this show that celebrates film with a guy that enjoys celebrating film. Okay, that's not a stretch.
Not really, no.
How did you read the manga?
No.
Okay. Are you just like an avid watcher of Crunchyroll? How did you come to know this series and watch it earlier this year?
Avid might be a bit of a stretch. This is one of those worlds that I kind of have a lot of osmotic knowledge in, more so than I binge everything. I'm not that guy.
Who do you know that's like the big anime fan that you tend to sponge off of?
Oh, there's a few. I mean, there's a bunch of YouTube channels that are dedicated to talking about it. So there's a handful of those that I kind of loosely follow, and
okay,
we'll pick up recommendations on occasion. And there's So there's a handful of either properties that I'm loosely familiar with that I will decide to invest my time and energy into, or there's specific studios that have a style that I like, so I'm willing to take a leap of faith on occasion on some of what they do. And then there's the occasional batch of, directors that the same thing. I'm willing to take kind of a flyer on what they're doing. The director in this case, it's not clear how much he... Sorry, no, I'm thinking of a different one. But the director in this case being Misaki Yuasa, who is one of the most interesting guys to kind of... If you watch a bunch of his stuff, very little of it is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Not just in tone and subject material, in animation style. He again, you watched this and you've watched Devilman Crybaby, and while he and his animating team certainly have...
Oh, is this the same director?
Yes.
Okay.
While they certainly have certain bits of style that are, if you would have thrown a character design done by one of them, you could probably guess that it came out of that studio.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, they really do try to experiment with different styles, with different genres within animation. And I find that endlessly interesting to observe.
How much stuff out of this one studio have you consumed?
Not all of it. Let me think. Because we're talking about, and I don't know, I think you also stepped down from the studio, in particular, this being Seo Science. Or Sorrow Science, forgive me, I can't remember. So Devilman, this, Japan Sinks 2020 came out recently. I watched that. I enjoyed that a fair bit.
Okay.
There's a few things he's done that I haven't watched. Ping Pong the Animation, Find Your Wave, which I think is like a more romantic comedy.
In a different medium, but the same motif, do you watch this sort of thing? Because I don't know. I have a hard time believing that your attraction to watching high school girls create a movie in 3 parts would be up your alley.
In a different medium, again, there's a lot of people and style being involved that might tempt me into watching it.
Okay.
But I mean, again, if you
maybe done this way, not that.
Yeah, if you were to tell me, here's a show about people who want to make anime. All right, not terribly interested in that, but then you wind up talking about, okay, it's based on this material that fairly celebrated. It's coming out of this studio with this director whose work I enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
There's now enough pieces for me to say, okay, I'll take a bit of a leap of faith, especially after seeing, a bunch of other people go, this is awesome, you should watch it.
It's kind of like a Christopher Nolan thing, where it's like, I respect the director, so I'm willing to give this movie, which I otherwise would not have bothered with, an opportunity.
I'll give it a shot. And if I get partway into a project, anything like this, and I kind of go, it's not for me, I have no problem turning it off.
Okay. So let's get into it. Silliness, our opening shtick away. The story features 3 characters. And we have Midori Asukusa, and she's a first-year student at Shibama. Wow, this is going to be hilarious.
Shibihama.
I'll
save you there.
Thank you. And she likes anime.
You would wind up going all Shibihama ala damn Bama. That's where you would have gone, and we both know it.
Roll Tide. She has a very tall friend whose name is Sayakaya Kanamori, who they kid around with her name later on, and what is it, like Yenamori or something like that? Money Mori?
Money Mori would be the more literal translation. They tend to do a lot of jokes around her name. When they do her flashback, Asakusa looks at her as a small child and goes, Mini Mori.
And then the third part of the trio is Mizusaki, Tsubame Mizusaki, who is a model. And what brings them together initially is that Asakusa and Mizuzaki both have a love of anime, and they get the idea of sharing their drawings together, and they were like, this would make for a great anime, and Kanamori takes this opportunity to be like, you know what, this is an opportunity to make money. Let me stop there. It seemed a little weird. Excuse me. It seemed a little weird that the high school student, which I thought it was like a big sister, but she was actually just another classmate, just a tall classmate, and she's very much like, this is an opportunity to make money.
She grew tall and strong with the power of sleep. They ask her about that at one point, and that's her line, and it's great.
Well, what I was getting to, and I was hoping you'd give me some background on this, like, so I'm in high school, and you've got school-centered, sponsored plays and musicals, and a newspaper and a magazine, and these are all sort of communist endeavors. There's no money to be made here. Whatever money is made through any kind of sponsorship goes into the production. There's nobody really gunning for profit here, with the exception of maybe some of the high school heavy metal bands. But that's a whole other conversation.
We'll pay you. Look, a lot of that stems from, if we're talking about the American system.
Well, that's what I was getting to. This is why. Where did the push for money? Like this character. This character, one, plays the role of producer really well, but she's motivated by making money, and she's just a high school kid.
Well, first of all, if we're gonna, some of this might be cultural differences, and I am not deeply steeped in Japanese culture, so forgive me. But come on, man. You had to know the people in high school that were always looking for an angle.
Yeah, I guess. Not many girls, but definitely a lot of the guys were like, how can I make money off of this?
Sure. Again, if you look at a lot of how that plays out in the American system, a lot of that's the internship concept. So, again, the internship concept is a little bit bigger, I think, here in the United States, especially when it comes to schools and especially as it pertains to potentially exploitative labor practices. That said, again, a lot of them will also provide avenues for money making, especially if you get into more of the physical, a lot of the more manual stuff. If you take wood shop or metal class or auto shop or whatnot, there's usually some opportunities there to sell what you make. Mm-hmm. So not unheard of, but yeah, not the most common thing either.
So this series is... Go ahead. Finish what you were saying.
I was just going to say that it's taking something that's slightly more uncommon, but not at all outside the realm of possibility, and utilizing the standard convenience of narrative.
So this is broken down into kind of 4-ish parts, if I recall. The first part is kind of getting the band together. They meet, they share ideas, they come up with an idea, and then it's a couple of episodes of them trying to put together their Eizouken studio with, spare parts and bubblegum. They need an advisor. Their advisor is kind of just hanging out. He's like, do what you want. I'm just here. I'm here because I have to be. And they get their first anime off the ground, which then gets them into the second anime, because now people have seen what they can do, and they were like, oh, they're seen as more of like, and I want you to weigh in here, because I'm going to Americanize this, but I don't know if there's something that I'm missing from the Japanese culture here. They're seen as more of like a marketing firm than they are like a fictional story animation studio. They did a thing. The thing was popular. People were like, do that, but do it for us so that we're popular too. That's marketing.
That's kind of the rough equivalent of saying that a television studio will shoot commercials, right?
Yeah.
Same kind of thing. You have you have to keep the lights on in some respects, so you take purely commercial jobs on occasion.
Sure. Yeah, my uncle used to like loan out his he did sound editing for movies. He's won an Oscar, but he would also put on loan the equipment that he housed at his home for studios to use, and that was purely to pay the bills. I get that.
Yeah, that's kind of what that is.
Okay.
And kind of buttressed against the fact that, hey, we are looking to do more in this space. You know, there is valuable experience to be had there. We produced a single short. It's not bad. But if you're willing to pay us to make something specific to you, we'll get to experiment with new things, see what we can do on a bigger budget, etc. Right. And then, which does lead into the third kind of mini arc where they make one that is purely for themselves.
Mm-hmm. The second arc where they're working with, what was the name of the club?
It would be it's a combination of...
It was the robotics club, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I bring that up just because, it's not clear to me how much they're into actual applied robotics versus...
It was more like a Gundam club.
Again, it's a little bit less fantastical than that when you consider the entire club, but yeah, it's just a little bit unclear to me which of those, where this group leans.
Okay. So somewhere between pure robotics and Gundam.
Yeah, a little bit.
So, in the second arc, they're having to now expand their repertoire. They're having to work with a whole other club. You got to remember, throughout this series, they're kind of taking the act of creating film and stretching it out over a dramatic plot. And so it's like, okay, they started with this short, then they expanded into this bigger project, and the highs and lows that entails. They get that done. That becomes successful. And then I think they're wanting to make like a feature short, correct? That's the third arc?
Yeah, it's a specific, entirely produced in-house in air quotes there a little bit because, high school students.
Mm-hmm.
But it is entirely, their own device, their own creation, and make it and then sell it at a big convention.
Right. And I think that takes us to the end where they get almost to finishing it and they don't have the right music track that matches the actual film, and so they're having to do last-minute edits to create something that matches the soundtrack because it's the only one they've got, and it's either that or they have no sound. And I think they end up being successful, and it ends with them watching the short themselves and sort of patting themselves on the back. So let me ask you. I'm going to give you my thoughts on this, and then we can sort of just open this up for back and forth discussion. I don't have like a lot of like specifics here. I know for me, this was a mixed bag. I didn't. That's not saying that I didn't enjoy it. I don't want you to jump up and be like, "Hey, wait, what now?" I enjoyed what I was watching. I enjoyed the power dynamic between Kanamori and the other two because I've been that person. I have been the person that says, nuts to your fancy ideas. We have a budget. We have time constraints. We only have a finite amount of resources. There's only so much we can do with this. Please be realistic. And I'm surrounded by people that are going, apricots and unicorns and bubblegum. And I'm like, fuck me. It's just to give you an equivalent. I got the nickname podcast ad on here because of my ability to sometimes impolitely say get back on track. These things should only be so long, and I'm not going to spend all night with you people, going off on a million tangents. Then there's poor Jesse, who you all just ran over and talked for 3+ hours, and only 1 hour and a half of it was maybe usable content for what he was discussing.
Look, when we don't have to deal with you, we follow the Steven Spielberg motto, we shoot for the editing room.
Yeah. Yes, the Patton Oswalt, I've shot so much film. He's doing a penis joke. oh, look at how much film I've shot. And then the woman ushers him out of the room and says, okay, I've got to make a movie out of this. Yeah, so I got where she was coming from, and she's actually my favorite character of this thing. Big shock.
Kanamori is everyone's favorite character, and I don't mean that unkindly. Like,
why do you say that?
Everyone loves her. Because she is she's very no nonsense, which is a nice counterpoint to the other two characters. She has some of the best. She has some of the best lines. She's probably the funniest.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not afraid to, crack the whip a little bit.
Did you think we needed 3 characters? Because I kind of got the feeling that there were times where the 2 dreamers were doing the same shtick. And maybe here's the problem. There's not a lot of C and D plot here. You maybe get a B plot at times. Especially with the model character. But you don't get a lot of C and D, and I think that's why I was having difficulties with this. My difficulties came in not enough content to stretch out for 12, 20-minute episodes, not in the content itself.
Yeah, it's a very straightforward narrative. And I kind of agree. I watched it again in preparation for this, and I tend to think episode 10 could just kind of in its entirety be cut.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of slim down a couple of the others. You could probably get to 10 and things are a little bit tighter. I don't disagree with that. Part of the reason you have the 2 different characters there is somewhat genre specific. You have the 3... Each one of them represents one of the 3 major elements that go into creating anime in particular. You have, again, Kanamori, the producer. Like, hey, budget. You want to work 48 hours a day for 36 days to finish this at the pace you're going. You have the world builder, the concept person in Asakusa, and then you have the character design and the very specific animator in Tsubame. They all those are the 3 kind of, again, pillars of how you get something done. You need world building and consistency. You need the actual animator, and then you need the producer to kind of keep things on track.
I was going to say, I think you would need that for just about anything. I think you have a big concept person, you have a details person, and then you have a boss.
Yeah. So that's why we get 3 people here. I do tend to agree that when you get a little bit of one, the other one kind of takes a back seat. But, again, for me, it's a relatively minor complaint.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I do think it's a valid one.
There's a lot of pulling Asakusa back to reality. And let me ask you about that, because where they're actually doing production, just as an example, when Red Letter Media did their Phantom Menace review, I really enjoyed watching all the behind the scenes footage of the Phantom Menace. I like behind the scenes documentaries of filmmaking. So seeing that kind of thing in this format, I was into, and that's what kept my interest in the show. When she would go off and be fanciful, and they're in the middle of making one thing, and then she's at her sketch pad. And we're done with we're done with concept. We have concept. What we need are content. What we need is content. And that's what they're working on. They need content and they need resources, content and resources. And she's off doing concept again. And there would be these long stretches of animation where, just as an example, the fire hydrants are lasers. And this is a thing and that's a thing. And I think if you're more of a fanciful person, and this might be a personal thing for me, I think if you're more of a fanciful person who likes to watch animation blossom, imagination rather, blossom, that might be interesting. I told you earlier, I've been really irritable and less patient with things, and there are just certain things where I'm like, I can't watch this. And even before that, this was pegging that button for me. Like, after a few episodes of her being footloose and fancy-free and her just wanting to go create more concepts instead of staying on the project, I was like, I either got to fast forward this or I got to walk around and do something. I can't watch this anymore.
That's fair. This is one of the things about like quasi niche products. If you're not really into the subject material, there's a lot of the little stuff like that is not going to be for you, and I think that's kind of what you ran into there.
It was appealing to you? You enjoyed her going into her imagination and almost producing a merry melody segment?
I can live with it. I was able to go with it because I think it serviced the narrative of, what do you do with a creative person when they're actually supposed to, when they're responsible for the direction of a big project, How many times have we seen or heard about so-and-so's creativity and just not being able to turn it off and actually get down to the nuts and bolts of filmmaking?
It's funny. I actually was watching something recently, and the concept of the director is he sits in that chair, and and it's very Psycho. Alfred Hitchcock. The director is so creative. There are so many people who work on a film set that are in charge of making or creating pretty pictures. The director is there to sign stuff, to be in charge, to be the guy holding the bag. It depends, and I guess it also depends on the director. Some directors are very take charge, and they want to be in charge of everything. But I remember them talking about shooting The Hobbit, and how Andy Serkis was the second unit director, and he was shooting whole scenes by himself with no director in sight. He was the director ostensibly. Then they threw out all of his footage and started over again. Poor bastard.
Yep.
And so,
if you look at Raiders of the Lost Ark, that entire chase scene with the truck is done by the second unit with all stuntmen, and then there's just some very specific shots of Harrison Ford.
Right.
Ditto the big fight in Temple of Doom, which was Harrison Ford was absent for after he herniated a disc in his back on the set of that movie. So they shot most of that big fight scene before they run through the tunnels and get in the minecart. And you'll notice if you watch it, the only shots of Harrison Ford where you see his face are extreme close-ups. That was all done after he had his back treated.
Right, and a lot of it's just him in the fist fight. That they're doing dueling fist fights with him in Short Round. Yeah,
so and 80% of what you see on screen there is stunt double rather than Harrison Ford. So when you get to a big production like that, it's very, very common for again, second unit directors to take big scenes or big chunks while the director has other concerns.
You have a director of photography that gets a lot of B-roll footage, scenery setting, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a lot of that. However, is somewhat contingent on budget, personnel, and studio.
Right. And so I think we're talking about three girls making a cartoon. To put it bluntly, and I kind of wanted her to be more involved with the production and less like it. She comes across at times like, I'm bored, let me sketch.
Yeah, well, again, there have been at least two major movie releases that we've talked about publicly on review shows that seem to suffer from the director being unbelievably, ADD.
I'm bored, let me sketch.
Yes.
We're in the middle of a shot here. Meh.
I'm going off to do a thing.
You figure it out. You do Artemis Fowl without me.
Or, here, we're making a Fantastic Four movie. You know what? I really don't want to make that. Yeah, sure you do. Here's your budget. Okay, I'm going to make that. Now, you know what? I really don't want to make it. But I've got all this money, so, sure. Let's not make what I'm supposed to make.
Talk to me about your thoughts on the one kind of B plot of this, which has to do with Mizuzaki and her modeling and her parents and all of that.
I don't have tremendous thoughts about it. It's fairly standard stuff for...
Sort of there to puff out the drama pieces.
Yeah, it's there to give her character a little more backstory. It's kind of the inciting incident for why do these three have to start their own club and face all these hurdles and engage in shenanigans instead of joining the established club? Well, one, conflict of this is one of the big early things about this. There is an anime research club that exists.
There's also a film club, which I tended to believe was Fistful of Yen and not Akira.
Well, no, they are the film club.
I thought they had said that there was another film club. Okay, I knew they said that there was an anime club, but everyone got stuck on, well, it's a research club, so it doesn't count. And then, we want to make anime. And they were like, you can make movies, you can't make anime, we've got one of those already.
Yeah, that's kind of that's kind of the logic there, such as it is.
And they got away with making anime anyway.
Yes, they did, because Kanamori bullies and negotiates her way into that.
I love that character.
She is the best. Part of the other inciting incident there being, we found the one other person who is actually interested in the process of creation of this material, but her parents have forbidden her from joining anything anime related as a school activity, so we'll sell her parents on this. She can say she's in a film club, and then we'll just kind of, pull a fast one on the old parental units.
I've been talking a lot about this. I've kind of given you my once-over opinions, what strong opinions I do have. You were very excited about this. Part of that was you were like, I know a film guy. I want to make him watch more anime, so here. But what do you like about this? What's exciting for you? What tickles your sack?
This is one of the reasons I don't like... This might sound crazy considering how much I complain about how much crap you make me watch. Hang on.
Now I have to talk positively about something. Fuck you, Radulich.
It's easier for me to talk about things I dislike.
Okay.
It's easier to fully realize the idea and the thought process and to verbalize it. Talking about stuff you like is actually more difficult.
I don't know. I tend to gush when I really like something.
I know. So, okay. It is more difficult for me for whatever reason.
Okay.
I used to be a more creative person than I am now. Let me start there.
What was your medium? What did you like to do? Were you a drawer? Were you a writer?
More writing.
Okay.
What'd
you write? Did you write short stories? Did you write screenplays? I wrote screenplays.
Short stories more than screenplays.
Okay.
Short stories, a handful of longer form stuff. My problem became, again, I say it was creative, which I was slightly more creative. What I think I realized at a certain point was, and I don't know if this is something I could have trained myself out of, and I just had too much other crap going on in my head at the time to actually buckle down and make an effort. Most of what I do, what I would think of creatively, was either unbelievably derivative or straight up, and I use this term, and I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound like a terrible insult, and I don't mean it that way to anyone who does this. I felt more like what I was writing was like staff writing crap. Like, there was nothing really original here. Someone else came up with the concept. Someone else came up with the big characters. And then what I created was...
So you were, like, doing continuations?
Yeah. Or, like...
Hey,
like
I'm not gonna beat you up too much. When I was writing short stories, it was insert Marvel character into this piece of appreciated literature. So Wolverine's in the middle of Mice and Men. Spider-Man's in the lottery. That sort of thing.
Okay. And look...
So you don't know derivative until you've seen some of my early work.
Buddy, there are entire forums dedicated to fan fiction like that. I have seen it.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, I'm like ashamed of that stuff.
That's because you and I have pride, a little bit of self-awareness. Most fan fiction is just... And again, I say most. So if you're out there listening to this and you write a lot of fan fiction, you can consider yourself to potentially be in the minority here. I'm sure all of you will. Most fan fiction kind of glories in its own like self-indulgence.
What is the line from Mr. Burns? Something in my own flatulence.
I revel in my own crapulence.
That's it. Yes. A lot of fan fiction and a lot of cosplaying is reveling in one's own crapulence.
Yeah, and again, to anyone out there that does that, I'm not taking a giant dump on your hobbies. Okay?
No, revel away.
Yeah, you enjoy it. It brings a little bit of joy to your life. Godspeed, party on. Don't leave me angry messages. I'm free. I was
gonna say, leave them for me. It's fine.
And everybody does that, right? Like that's one of the starting points for the creative process.
Yeah,
I steal what you know.
I see. I do. I steal.
Yeah. And so again, I'm not sure if I could have trained myself out of it. I probably could have, but between life crap, it just never really happened. So seeing the creative process kind of realized this way it brings a little bit of joy to my life when seeing some of that.
Okay.
Seeing
you genuinely like the Asakusa character. She makes you joyful.
Not all the time, but for the most part. Yeah,
okay.
Her just the ability to throw yourself into a world of your own invention, to create internal consistency in that, to realize that the way she does, and then to have people to share it with. I mean, come on. Who doesn't want to do that?
Sure, I used to be that way. I was much, much younger. And to a degree, I can still be that way. Like, of the three characters, I can either be Kanamori or I can be Asakusa. I can't be the details person. I cannot be Mizuzaki. And you know that about me. Like,
I very much know that about you.
I can do detail in terms of scheduling, but that's about it. But I've created, in my own head and through play, large concept worlds. I remember as a kid, I had like one toy of like almost, one or two toys of various iterations. So like a couple of He-Man, a couple of G.I. Joe, a couple of Transformers, some Cobra here. And I created this, what looked like a mess to my mother, and which is why she would say, "Clean your room," was to me this giant film that I was producing.
Yeah, and again, everybody kind of gets that on some level. So seeing that realized visually the way it was, yeah, I really enjoyed that. What's the line about? I saw this someone say about. I think it was "You Will Remember the Show." I think maybe not a whole lot, but you remember the old Muppet Babies cartoon?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That and I think the original run of Rugrats,
which I did not watch.
Oh, you missed out.
Yeah, you're younger than I am.
Fair enough. I think those two shows do the best of job at capturing what it's like to be a small child.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to just instantaneously change your world.
Yeah.
And
it's soulful. It's it's wistful. It's Whimsical. Yes.
Yeah, and you get that here. It is a very creative person expressing that creativity, and then the showrunners, the directors, and whatnot, finding a way to represent that visually. Just the complete utter change in the art style. Everyone is there together for those moments, and they're all kind of going along for the ride.
When I was in college, I got to take a directing class, and I got to direct two other students in a play for my class project. And I remember that profound sense of fulfillment from the three of us, that we had created something. I mean, we took somebody else's work, obviously. We weren't, doing our own individual stuff here, original stuff. But, I chose a play to direct, and I directed two actors, and we didn't know each other from Adam except through this class. And there was just a mutual respect and a profound dignity to it all. And when I heard, I was never anyone's favorite student.
I am shocked and appalled by that sentiment, sir.
Yeah, my punk rock middle finger attitude is known far and wide. And to hear a teacher say something nice about me on the occasion that it happened, and in this particular case, it was like he came into it knowing nothing about the medium, and he took to it like a duck to water. And so here's his production of blah, blah, yakety schmackety. Really filled me with a lot of pride. It's one of the few instances in my life that I can point to and say, I was proud of myself. I felt good about me in doing something creative. I don't have a lot of those.
Tell me about it. I mean, look, what I spend most of my time doing at this point is dry transcription of other people doing things that are actually interesting.
Yep.
I write only in the technical sense of the word, that I am technically typing things out that are written.
We appreciate what you do, Robert. Whether you believe it or not, people read your stuff and they appreciate it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so we've been talking for a good 40 minutes here. I've had one massive internal eruption. But,
well, that puts you on track.
But I feel like we've covered a lot of it, so I'm going to go ahead and pitch it over to you, and like anything that we haven't talked about, anything you feel like we gave short shrift to that you want to cover in detail.
I suppose just a couple of things. Most of the characters are all kind of they're somewhat broadly drawn, but they are endearing. Just kind of a hard balance to strike sometimes. One of my favorite things is a really subtle detail, but anytime they go into the imagination land, for want of a better expression, most of the sound effects are voice acted. So it is literally just the characters or the actors, if something's blowing up, going da-doom. And it's a really nice little touch to kind of remind you what's going on. The music that they use for this is all very much on point. I agree. Again, I do agree with you that you could probably trim enough of this down to get you to 10 instead of 12 episodes. But if you're interested in, again, kind of the medium, this is a really just kind of bright, joyful, soul-rejuvenating experience to see to see how this all plays out. Again, everybody gushes about Kanamori, so I'm going to add to that here a little bit. It's very easy, especially for the creative types, to cast the producer as the cold, unfeeling monster, the individual that takes their bright, shiny, creative baby and destroys it and then sells it for profit. So them making Kanamori a very sensible character, and giving her perspective. Again, this being the financial kind of brass tacks of how we're going to do all this, giving that character realistic motivation for how she is. Again, a big chunk of her flashback that we get is her observing the death of her. I think it was her uncle's business, and the lesson she took from that, like not just in terms of the practicality of marketing and whatnot, but the reality that this is something that people worked on. This is something that people put a lot of time and a lot of energy into, and something is lost when it dies. And it's very, very easy for again, a lot of the creative people in the world to kind of overlook the nuts and bolts of business.
In a way, it's very poignant now, given what's happened with COVID has caused a lot of businesses to go out of business. People have lost their livelihoods, and we're not just talking about the waiters and waitresses who don't have bars to go to. People lost their bars, they lost their restaurants, they lost their businesses because street traffic came to nil. So in a way, this is prophetic's not the right word. It's almost a fable. Prescient. It's almost like a modern fable for what's going on currently.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to kind of point out that I do deeply appreciate them taking that character whose role in the world could be easily turned into a very stereotypical kind of villain.
Yeah, they didn't comb her hair up so that it matches horns. You know, she's pragmatic and practical, not selfish and ego-driven and money-driven, which I think is important, and that the internal dynamics of this group are not about art, money. It's more nuts and bolts than that, and therefore it was more real for me.
Yeah, this show does a very good job of kind of showing you how animation is done. What was the other thing I had? I suppose that's kind of it. It'll probably come to me in a little bit later, and I'll go, how could I have forgotten to talk about X?
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I remember a couple of things. One, it's amusing to me, and this is a very, very clever anime in terms of its presentation, because most of the time when they're talking about any of the technical stuff, it's not just the characters waxing on about the realities of how they're having to do stuff. They are showing you as well as telling you. What they're talking about is usually what's going on screen, so you can kind of see it in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Which was a nice little touch, especially when when so much anime can be very dialogue heavy, because animation is expensive and time consuming.
Yeah, I especially, and this is just a film nerd geek thing for me, was when she was talking about specific edits, because we tend to think of edits in a certain way. Batman v Superman was edited with a shotgun. Because
Michael Bay's movies are edited like a machine gun.
Yeah. And that's because the scenes cut, it's cut, and it's jarring for the viewer, and that's the angle at which we're attacking it. She was talking about the amount of time spent cutting a thing. How many cuts how much time does it take to create each cut?
How many drawings do you do per cut?
Right.
I love that one. Like, here, this is the average. This is how many pages are done for the average cut, and then she drops a pile that's like 18 times larger. This is how many cuts This is how many pages you have for half this number of cuts. We got a problem.
I don't want to. We're having such a nice conversation. I don't want to bring this up and have you go into a negative ditch on me. But something like Gambit, which this is the kind of thing where they've actually shot stuff. I'm
not sure that's true.
There were at least test screening the scripts done, and I think some stuff shot like costumes and stuff like that at various points in production.
They might have done screen tests. I don't think they ever actually shot film for
Gambit. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But okay, better example: New Mutants.
Oh, how much have we shot of that thing?
And how, and I think what I bring up New Mutants because it's really a classic example of how a movie can get, even before we see it, how a movie can just get ruined in pre-production, and how different cuts of a movie and how you have to cut things different ways. They want to cut it like a horror movie, so they cut it this way. And then when they decide they're not going to do a horror movie, they have to recut the whole movie. And it sounds easier than it is. It's not.
Oh, it is so not easy. One of the things that a lot of people who have done nuts and bolts filmmaking will tell you, and will tell most critics, and I think this is an important thing to remember, most of the time what people complain about when they complain about a film is they're not complaining about what they're actually complaining about. They're complaining about the editing.
Yeah.
They're complaining about the composition of the movie. So anytime you're potentially bagging on the acting, there might be the take you want, and and they elected not to use it because the editing is the final thing that decides everything that gets on screen.
that's certainly a conversation you and I have had, where you've taken actors to task because of the acting, and I'm like, you can't lay that at their feet. I've seen them in better stuff. I've seen them in things that got them awards, and they performed much better. This was a direction issue. This was an editing issue. This was, things like that. And so I'm very careful to not blame actors when going back to director of Psycho.
Hitchcock.
Thank you. Alfred Hitchcock, when he regards actors as just moving scenery. I haven't watched a tremendous amount of Hitchcock, but I find him to be one of my favorite directors just because of his attitude. Like, here is a man who understands the visual medium of film. And we were talking earlier tonight, and it's kind of my last word on this, and I'll let you have your last word, and then I think we'll get out of here. I was talking about Netflix has a schema, has a structure for their 10-act series. So whether it's Umbrella Academy or Lock and Key or this or that, there's always, and I noticed it more today watching Umbrella Academy than I have in the past, and that's just because I think I've watched a lot of Netflix this past year.
Well, there's not a lot else.
Yeah. Like, I watched Claws, and I'm not saying Claws is a great show or anything like that, but
for those of you who haven't seen it, it's really not.
It's structured differently because it's a weekly crime drama, than the made-for-binging Netflix shows, which are done more as chapters. And the other thing I've noticed about the Netflix structure is because these are low budget and that these are made for TV, it's long stretches of dialogue, one action sequence, long stretches of dialogue. Next chapter. And they move the needle incrementally so that you're just interested enough to see what happens next. But they don't give you too much, and then usually 7, 8, and 9 they hit they hit the gas, and shit starts to actually happen. Which, if you have no patience for it, is agonizing. And if you're not currently undergoing chemo treatments and have chemo brain, isn't nearly as bad. Jesse seems to love the show. God bless him. But my point is that
Jesse loves a lot of crap.
Jesse's a good person.
Hey, that is not a reflection on his character at all.
Correct.
It is a statement on what he enjoys, and I don't shame him or anyone else for most of. There's a handful of things that if you enjoy genuinely, I will shame you for. Most of it, if you find brightness in the world, wherever you find it, I'm not going to take issue with you.
I guess what I'm saying here is with Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken, there was a great idea here. And there's a passion for film inherent in the medium, inherent in the content. There is a passion for these kinds of characters that we've talked about already earlier in the show tonight. It did somewhat fall into the trap of we're making this strictly for television. Like this had a binge feel to it, and it kind of drove me insane at times. I wished I'd be curious to see what the movie versions of this are like. To see if it, by virtue of the fact that it's a movie and not a television show, it has to move faster. But I'd be curious to see what those look like.
I agree with that. I'd be curious to see how that plays out. There's such a.
Did I not say the same thing for Devilman Crybaby?
I don't know.
Or either that or I'm having deja vu. One of the two.
I think you've said that before about other things. I don't think we said that about Devilman.
Okay, fair enough.
Again, it is a common enough refrain that we've both said it in the past. The dichotomy between stuff that is made for television and stuff that is made for binging is an interesting one to me. I promise not to go too deep into a tangent here. But what is the goal of something produced for I'll say network broadcast television, right? What's the goal?
Get ratings.
Sure, but more basic.
Oh,
right?
Okay. Just go. Say it.
The goal is to retain and grow audience week to week. So you structure your season with that in mind. That's why every pilot ever ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. That's why every first season ends on a cliffhanger, because we're trying to generate interest and generate an audience and then get renewed, because we want to continue making the show.
Right.
But it is broadcast television, for the most part, there are exceptions to this, for the most part, lives and dies week to week. And the trends that reveals over time. The goal of streaming content, by contrast, is quite different. The goal of streaming content is not to get you to come back the next week. It's to get you to spend as much time as possible on that site, on that service.
Okay. To be clear, this was released as a weekly show on Crunchyroll.
I know. Crunchyroll does a lot of simulcast stuff.
Okay.
Which is one of the big selling points of that service. Like other places, this is one of the big issues with a lot of the anime that's on Netflix, because Netflix will not do simulcast. They will not do week to week. So for a lot of the anime stuff that they have access to, they don't release it when it's being aired live. You have to wait until it wraps its airing run in Japan, and then they dump it. Mm-hmm. So you can binge it. Now, I assume they have some internal analytics that show that this is actually more useful to them, a more useful practice to get more people to watch it than going week to week, because otherwise the decision makes no sense. But again, that being the goal, a lot of that stuff is structured in a way to keep you on the site rather than to retain you week to week. So you don't get so much cliffhangers between episodes as you get slow building narrative tension, that because you would just structure it differently. If your goal is to get someone to sit down, use Netflix for 8 hours, hypothetically, and you want to get someone to watch all of the show for the entire 8 hours and keep them on the site, you wouldn't do a cliffhanger every episode. That gets old in a hurry.
Right.
You wouldn't do a lot of self-contained episodes because that's filler. You draw out your rising tension for as long as it's reasonable, most of the time. There are exceptions to that. And then you have your big climax, because that's how you would structure, I want you to watch this whole thing from start to finish. And that's just not how television is structured if it's broadcast, because the entire presentation and timing of it is very different. And I do find that dichotomy very interesting in terms of both production and artistic, from both the production and the artistic side. So my last word on the show we're talking about. I'm gonna wax word. I'm not going to be deeply specific here, so my apologies for those of you who are used to me being very, very cynical and very specific. I liked watching this show. It made me feel good. And I was sad when it ended. Like, I got done with the last episode, and I was sad that I wouldn't see those characters again. I wanted more. And it maybe not in the moment, again, is there really enough material here for 12 episodes? Maybe, maybe not. They stretched parts of it. We've talked about that. But just kind of in general, I really enjoyed it. And I was sad when it was over, because we're not getting any more.
Are you interested at all in the other iterations of this project? I believe there is... First of all, you're going to go back and read the manga. I think there's a live-action film that is currently in development.
I don't know. Maybe again, a lot of that comes. I'm less interested in reading it, not because I hate reading. I
don't think anyone's ever accused you of that.
No one has. But I'm not a big reader of manga. I'm just not. I
Okay.
don't know if it's. I don't know why. I'm not a big comic book reader in general, be that Western or Eastern.
Yet you have all these opinions on comic books.
I have a lot. Again, I have a lot of osmotic knowledge.
Okay.
I have a lot of people.
Am I
that
to take
know.
that to mean that you watch a lot of YouTube videos? Is that what this is?
It's not just YouTube videos. There's a lot that I read on the material. There's a lot of reviews I read, and I know a lot of people that care very deeply about some of this stuff. So I just pick it up because they care.
Okay. All right.
Second of all, hang on. In all
Yep.
seriousness, when have I expressed a profoundly serious opinion on comics?
I don't know. You weigh in on things usually negatively. And I'm
Okay,
like,
that's true.
Where is he getting this from? All right, listen. Let me ask you a question.
All
I
right.
didn't know if you were done here. What's the next thing you're gonna make me watch?
I didn't come to this one prepared with anything. I didn't
Okay.
go into Devilman with anything prepared, but as that kind of went on, I'd already watched this and went, Mark, this is very dark. And as I think about it now, it occurs to me that the vast majority of the stuff I have suggested is a little bit dark and weighty.
Well, we've got Akatsuko Season 3, which you were not a part of, scheduled for September when that comes out. And there's not a lot of room on the... We're doing Kingdom, and that's a couple of seasons, and I'm eventually going to have to start watching that. We've got The Babadook in October. So we've got plenty of stuff that you're interested in that you think about it, Think about the kinds of things that you enjoy that you've watched recently, and we're like, Mark needs to see this. We need to talk about it.
I don't have a long list like that.
As I said, think about it.
You're trying to... The fact that you tried to set me up with... I've now hit you with the 1-2, and I'm trying to lower the boom.
All right. Well, as long as it's not Akira or Fist of the North Star.
No. I would not go that direction. Let me rephrase. I would not choose those two things. I don't have anything against either. I haven't watched Fist of the North Star.
Really? You've never seen Fist of the North Star?
Not in detail. I might have caught an episode here or there. It's...
My God, everybody I knew in high school, of my group of friends, that's all they talked about was Fist of the North Star.
It's not my issues with Fist of the North Star is not only is it like it's not just power fantasy, which it is. It's the hero is never in danger.
Right. Yeah, and that frustrates the living shit out of me.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that I kind of resisted a little bit, I think. Again, and part of that, to be fair to Fist of the North Star, part of that is genre conventions when it was originally written. Fist of the North Star was originally written in, I think the original, manga was, 70s, late 70s, early 80s, and then the produced anime, of course, was also so it's very 80s in that respect. And there's just a lot of genre and cultural conventions that go along with certain periods of time. Doesn't mean I don't hold that against it in the sense that how dare you? Everyone was doing it. That's what was done. Doesn't mean I enjoy it. No, I wouldn't go with either of those. How would I lower the boom on you, so to speak? How much time would you be willing to invest? No, I can't do that to you.
Please
It would
don't
take
make
too
me
long.
watch something that's more than a season long. I can't handle it these days.
What if I were to suggest what I'm thinking of? We would have to tackle it. And bear in mind, when I say have to, I do mean that. We would have to tackle it in, I think, 5 different episodes. We would have to do 5 different parts.
Then you'll be waiting until next year.
Yeah, I know, which is why I'm thinking. Let me think about that. It's a show I never recommend, not because I don't enjoy it. I do enjoy it.
What's the show?
I'm not going to out myself as a fan of this property.
Oh,
Not that there's
Jesus
any.
Christ.
There's nothing wrong with it. and in fact, it has a very large fandom. I don't like. There's how do I say this? I've said this before. There are to you and to others. There are certain expectations or conventions that come along with being a fan of certain properties. And I very rarely conform to them, so I choose not to discuss a lot of my fandoms that way, because I get really sick of, again, some of the expectations that go along with it. And, look, I may not have a ton of credibility, but there's only so much nerddom I want to associate with myself in some respects. Okay, it occurs to me also that no one listens to this, so maybe I'm not exactly putting myself out there in a real way.
Okay, it is 9:40 Eastern Standard Time. Get on with it.
It's not that I don't enjoy the show or that I don't think the show is praiseworthy. I'm never sure how other people will react to it because it is very odd in many, many ways.
Okay. I'm going to say it a third time. Think about it, and we will come back to this. As people listen to this going, damn it, they didn't name anything.
No. I will say this. So I'll say it, and I will just let it kind of hang there in that respect. How you would react to JoJo's, I would be curious to see, but I'm not sure how much of a productive discussion we would get out of it, but I don't know.
And this is multiple seasons?
It tends to be discussed in the different parts, and I say that only because Part 1 and Part 2 encompass the first season. But there's a very clear point of delineation between the two. And then the other parts tend to be one season each.
Okay. Here's what I'm going to tell you. You need to think about this, and you need to think about me as your friend. I have to watch a lot of television to keep up with the other podcasts I do on this show. So, which is the other consideration. It's all 20-minute episodes. Mm-hmm. I think the first 2 seasons are on Netflix. I'd have to look up the others. I mean, they are all on Crunchyroll too. I don't know if they're on Crunchyroll's part of HBO Max, but yeah, I'd have to look. JoJo's, you said? J-O-J-O?
It's JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And it is... Put it this way. It's not called Bizarre for nothing.
Oh, great. So, you're talking to Captain Chemo Brain here, who's highly irritable and doesn't do esoteric even on his best day, and you're pitching esoteric. Terrific.
No. It's... I don't know. I don't know if esoteric's the right word. Okay. Here's an example. Here's an out-of-context scene from Part 1.
Okay, apparently 3 seasons are on Hulu, and 2 are on Fubo. 4 seasons are on Crunchyroll. None of this appears to be on HBO Max. 4 seasons are on Tubi.
So, let me think. Yeah, there's only 4 seasons. Again, there's 5 parts, but 4 seasons of television.
Okay.
So, out of context moment from Part 1.
Mm-hmm.
Vaporized Jack the Ripper leaps out of a decapitated horse to assault our heroes.
Great. Okay. Tomorrow we'll be doing a comics. Moving on.
So you know what you are potentially in for.
Yeah. I don't have the strength to argue with you anymore. All right, tomorrow we're doing a comic strip. We're gonna look at the book. We're gonna look at the first trade paperback, and then we're gonna look at the first season of Umbrella Academy, and then Wednesday
continuing our trend of being right on trend.
Yeah.
That whole thing came out a year ago.
Well, that's the problem, is I didn't know what Umbrella Academy was, so I never scheduled it. Or I would have scheduled it, accordingly 2 months later. Myself and Pat Mullen will be looking at Larry Holmes, the underappreciated Larry Holmes. And then we're going to do something a little different next Monday, a week from tonight. Robert and I are going to get together again. We're going to delay podcasting so that he can watch the Kentucky Fried Movie. We're going to watch it together using the HBO Prime mechanism that allows you to do that, so we can actually enjoy it on screen at the same time. And then, as soon as it's over, we're going to flip the record button on so that I can get his instantaneous reaction. I don't know how long the show is going to be. I don't know if he's even going to make it through the movie. But we're going to do this as an experiment. So that'll be fun. The Kentucky Fried Movie, it is absolutely one of my favorites. Your description of somebody jumping out of a horse that's already a vampire attacking the heroes. Yeah.
There's a well-dressed Italian man who punches a frog as a demonstration of his magic sunshine powers.
Okay. I will meet your whatever nonsense you just said and raise you a Catholic high school girl's in trouble. I don't know if you've ever watched hardcore pornography in front of other people before, and I would not necessarily suggest this is hardcore pornography, but it is mimicking as such, and it's hilarious, and I'm dying to hear your reaction when you have to watch this with another person in the virtual room. So, I see your JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and raise you a Catholic high school girl's in trouble.
I have no other point of reference for what you just said, so on the one hand, yeah, I probably could raise you something else, but
it's not a contest.
I know, which is why I'm not going to.
Tuesday, the 11th, myself and Alexis Hano will discuss the show Upload, assuming I can get it all watched in time. And then myself and Jesse Starcher will do a Metal Hammer of Doom review of the live from the Doom Saloon 2 virtual concert that Clutch is doing. So we'll talk about our set list that we uploaded, and we'll talk about the show, and that'll be fun. And then we're going to have someone we don't normally have on here. Cole Marentet will be available to discuss the first of the 3 season series Transformers War for Cybertron. We're starting with the first one, which just got released, Siege. So we'll talk about that one. I got through in just a few hours. That was easy.
I gotta watch that, in no small part because you have me on eternal standby.
Yeah. So, I was presuming, either Cole Marentet or Robert Winfree will be joining me to talk Transformers War for Cybertron Siege. In the meantime, you can check out...
I imagine this will be the best use of the Transformers intellectual property since the original 1984 movie.
It was good. It was definitely not something I needed to watch with my kids, though. You can catch either version of the Warrior Nun episode that we did on the book. The one where I captured no audio from Chris, and the one where we just cut his audio out altogether, and all you get is me laughing at nothing. So either way, we discussed the book at length. I discussed the book at length. Myself and Jesse Starcher reviewed the 2016 Lagerstein album, All for Rum and Rum for All. We did A Long Road to Ruin for Pirates of the Caribbean, and finally, myself and Jason Teasley reviewed Warrior Nun Season 1. God willing, that doesn't get a second season. It's terrible. All right.
Since when has that ever stopped something from getting a second season?
All right, and I mean absolutely every word of this. You have 5 minutes. Do your plugs.
You can find my review of the latest UFC event in the MMA Zone of 411 Mania when Derek Brunson, looking like a cross, but who was it I heard him crossed with? Half like Wesley Snipes from Demolition Man, half some hip-hop artist. So that meant nothing to me. But he was rocking the blonde hair. Derailed the hype of Edmund Shabazian in the main event. That entire UFC event had 8 fights. The broadcast...
Weren't you like losing fights as they were happening?
We lost one fight the day of. Before the event started, someone tested positive for COVID. And then mid-event, someone fainted when they were about to walk out and was deemed medically ineligible to fight. Yeah. The entire broadcast, from sign-on to sign-off, was 5 hours and change.
And it was 1 fight per hour. There was 1 fight per hour.
Sometimes less with longer time between them.
Oh God. Ugh, you poor bastard.
Look, I don't envy the poor production crew and what they had to deal with, but I will credit them. They made the most of it. I will credit them for not stretching it out unreasonably, in no small part because we were on ESPN+. So if you ended early, you just ended early. So you can find my full review of all the action from that event.
Action.
You know, the action itself wasn't bad when it happened.
Okay.
You can find... I host the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. This week I did a review of that and a preview of this coming week's event, which is a 13-fight affair, I believe, with a heavyweight main event, because God hates me, between Alexei Oleinik and Derek Lewis. And I'll find out how much God hates me when I see how long this fight goes. If it ends in less than 10 minutes, God is feeling charitable. Any longer than that, and we are being punished. Because, yeesh. So you can find my preview of that event. I will have coverage of that this coming Saturday, also in the MMA Zone of 411 Mania, so please feel free to stop by and say hello if you're so inclined. Mark mentioned the things I'm going to be doing here on the network coming forward. So you can look forward to me podcasting fairly frequently this month. I took most of July did not feature me. And I'm going to be not entirely weekly, but fairly weekly for this month. Were we still doing the one and only Ivan?
I mean, it's on the calendar. You said you didn't want to.
Yeah, but since when do you care what I want?
Okay.
I just wanted a confirmation one way or the other.
Yep, it's on the calendar.
Sure, I will probably watch and review that then.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's kind of all I've got going on. I suppose if I'm just plugging whatever I want. Congratulations to one of my brothers who got married on Thursday.
Mazel tov.
He's the only one that listens to these shows, so he might actually hear that. I'm the oldest of 4, so I have 3 brothers. He's the only one that listens to our podcasts. Which is odd, because my youngest one, you'd think would like the Metal Hammer of Doom.
Yeah, maybe he has to give it a listen before, he hasn't decided yet, see?
Could be.
All right.
So, yeah, that's what you can expect from me coming up for the month. It should be an experience. Time will continue to progress.
All right, folks, thank you for joining us on TV Party tonight. For Robert Winfree, I'm Mark Radulich. Be well, be safe, and behave.